Hey there, everyone. Rusty Nelson here, talking watercolor. This is episode 13 of the podcast of the vlog, and been making some headway on shooting some tutorials in the last week since I'm over my summer teaching schedule in June. So back to focusing on getting some good scenes recorded and some things other than just the basic shape tutorials that I've been working with in the last few episodes. So I've done a few scenes and topics, I guess, reflections and refractions on some previous ones. So if you're just new to the channel and you're getting in here looking around, I have really just started with some basic fundamental watercolor skills that you need to work with, some drawing skills and understanding of perspective and things like that that you need to work on and become familiar with and practice. And that's the key thing to all of this is practice. Get in there and spend 10, 15, 20 minutes a day on any of these skills, and you're going to be so much further ahead than if you haven't. So I definitely had some good comments on, let's look here, on vlog 12. One of the viewers was asking about commenting on paper, and I definitely was showing some of the types of papers that I've worked with and do work with for various reasons. And I think it was a question about sizing. You know, what sizes should you start out with, and I think definitely the best advice, I think, if you're really just getting started with watercolors, to work small. Don't let scale get in your way, and it can get in your way if it's too big. You need to kind of learn to manage it at a smaller scale with the brushes and stuff. And again, keep in mind as you go up in size on paper, you'll need bigger brushes to cover the real estate that you have to cover with the washes. You can't paint big paintings with little brushes, so get as big a brush as possible. A good flat 2-inch brush will lay down a lot of watercolor onto your paper, or even a big mop, something that it looks they look like a big mop. So that's something that just loads up and has a lot of moisture that you can get onto your paper. And I think that was one of the other comments I saw too, that a person, they're having trouble with getting in there and doing wet on wet techniques. Mainly they're saying the paper is drying too quick and they're using a good quality paper. So if that's the case, whereas like a Canson, no matter how much water you put on it, that paper dries quickly. So if it's a good quality watercolor paper that is designed to hold and retain the water and stay moist as long as possible, the only other option is that you're just simply not laying down enough water water and pigment onto the surface of the paper. So yeah, and I do see that as a problem with students in my in-person classes, where they're mixing up maybe just little dinky amounts of the pigment and the puddles on their palette, and then they come back in, they have to remix again. So by the time they remix and apply it to the paper, apply it to the paper, everything's drying too fast. So you really have to mix up a pretty good sized puddle of the water with the saturation you want, whether it's a tea, a milk, whatever consistency you think is appropriate for whatever you're doing. You got to have a pretty good size puddle on there. And a lot of times I'll even mix up maybe 2 or 3 puddles of different colors that I can just dive into and grab and mix in there, so that wet on wet technique, you can get one color making a gradient into another color and have some color variety in those tones. But definitely practice that even before you're trying to do scenes or subject matter of still lifes or something like that. Just practice making a flat tone of a shape, just a rectangle on your piece of paper. Just make a nice flat tone, and then do one that's going from a saturated color down to a less saturated color, and then start doing your 2-color, three color gradients, starting with a color at the top, introducing another color in the middle, and then a third color at the bottom of the wash. And that's just some fundamental wet on wet skills that you need to practice and do that. And don't just think you've done it once or twice that's enough. Just, that's a good warm-up technique. If you have some spare paper laying around before you dive into a still life or a scene, just warm up with doing some of these fundamental exercises, and things will go a lot smoother once you get going. And it gives you just some more time practicing those fundamental skills. So definitely more water on the paper. So if it is drying too fast, you're just simply not using enough water. I always tease my students about, you got to have two things for watercolor. You got to have water and you got to have color. So in varying degrees of amounts. So if you are going for a wet on wet technique, slop some water and some pigment onto that paper so you have something to work with. Let's see here. I think another issue on that question about the paper was sizes. I think I didn't go down that rabbit hole. Other than, if you're wanting a lot of detail, it's better to work big so you have more space to work with. Or you're going to have really small, fine brushes if you're working on a 9x12 or something like that. So it's a matter of how you're deciding you want to work with watercolor, the type of techniques, the styles, the things that you like to see. Are you really highly into the refined detail, the photorealism, or you want to be more expressive, more interpretive with your watercolors? So there's a lot of decisions you're going to have to make and figure out. I've kind of gone from the uber refined photorealistic techniques as I was younger, and I'm slowly trying to loosen up and get more expressive and more colorful and let the colors and the watercolor techniques do a lot of the work, where I'm not fussing with stuff as much. And I can always tell with my students in my in-person classes what type of a person they are. And watercolor is a great media to be able to kind of identify what type of artist that you're thinking you are, the types of things you like by how fussy you are. Or if you're really expressive, you like the abstracts, you just like the colors doing various things and interacting versus controlling and doing that. So, but I've done some really nice little shorts that if you can go find them on my channel and watch them. I've done several ink drawing shorts, real quick workflow overviews, working with maybe a subject matter with a underdrawing with a pencil, or doing it straight out, working with pen, directly on the paper, no prep work. Doing that, it's a nice exercise in building your confidence and working with basic general shapes and then refining it into something finer and more refined. And I'm also doing some introductions and doing more of them with color washes, and then I'm using my crutch word, working with line art on top of the color wash. And it's really a bulletproof and easy technique that combines the flexibility and the expressiveness of the color washes that you can get with the wet on wet techniques. You can maybe practice getting some of that without worrying about keeping it within the lines, without it, thinking it has to look like something as you're applying it. And that's a big mental hurdle to get over. Lay that down, let it dry, and then come back in and work with your pen and ink, your Sharpie marker or another marker. Just remember, depending upon what type of a pen you're working with, a Sharpie marker is indelible. So you can go in and draw on top of the wash, and it's a nice solid black line. And then if you want to accent and add more color on top of that, the Sharpie marker will not reactivate and get fuzzy or anything. It will stay where you put it. Whereas maybe a fountain pen ink, or maybe if you get some indelible ink that you're drawing with an actual old-fashioned, dip the pen in the blotter and get some ink in your pen and draw with that. That's a great technique as well. Depends on how fast you want to work. I noticed, and I do remember, it's been a while since I've worked with an actual pen and ink nib and indelible ink. I know it's a bit slower process than working with a marker. I think you can really get some speed going when you're drawing with a Sharpie point. Plus, with the nibs, you can get that line variation from thin line to thick line depending upon the pressure you're putting onto the paper, whereas you don't get that with a micron pen or a Sharpie pen or something that's got a standard size to it. So definitely work with that. I think another, composition. The one viewer that made the comment about paper sizes, and that, again, I'm still not sure if I have answered the paper size question. Keep going down rabbit holes. The paper sizes, I've worked all over the place, and it finally dawned on me a few years ago. If I worked with a standard paper size, framing's a lot easier overall. So I've been buying like the 11 by 15, 12 by 16 type sheets of paper. I've gotten the big 18 by 24 inch sheets of paper as well, but I typically will tear them down. Plus I bought a huge, it looks like a 42 inch roll of the Arch paper that I can just tear off to any size I want and wet it down, flatten it out, pre-stretch it, things like that. So I work with a variety of things, both the blocks, the pads, and the roll papers. It's just a matter of the how frisky I'm feeling size-wise on how big a painting I'm going to be doing. So I think I just addressed some of the size things. Let me know if I didn't. If that description sucked, let me know. Composition. This person was also asking about composition, and I did a quick search out on Google. The fundamentals of your composition essentially are balance, proportion. I got a list here. You think I'd have these memorized? Balance, proportion, emphasis, rhythm, movement, contrast and harmony, and pattern and repetition, and in any combination of all the above. But I also went out there and I found just tons of good, like here's a printout of a beginner's composition guide, and that's all you have to do is Google some of this stuff and you get some ideas. So we have like the rules of third, using the golden section or the golden triangles, the spiral selection, the golden spiral. You've probably seen some of that stuff. There's some really good videos on the golden ratio. A cross composition, a focal point where you're putting everything, all the subject matter in mass in a location, maybe in combination with rules of thirds. Diagonals. Just remember, compositionally, diagonals are definitely more dynamic in a composition and will lead a viewer through or to something in your composition more so than a vertical or horizontal. They tend to act as barriers in a composition. So if you have maybe a tree coming straight up in the scene, you're separating your composition into two different things. And so you got to make sure there's something on each side of the composition. I like integrating triangular groupings into a composition. That's just a natural thing that it's a pleasing element for the eye to use. Keep in mind the reading. We're reading from the upper left coming down to the lower right. And so there's tons of stuff. I found this one. I found that one out there. That one's pretty cool. It's got little sketches and everything with it too. I'm too lazy to do it for you. Sorry. It's like, why do it? Somebody's already spent the time doing it. So compositional guides from Edgar Allan Payne's Composition of Outdoor Painting. So there you go. So a nice little sketch up of that. Get out there and find those. There's tons of stuff out on Google already kind of organized for you, but definitely lots of options for you. Just depends on what you're going to be working with. Got to remember to look at the camera. So what else? Do I see anything just jumping out at me? So I actually would a lot of times have my students do especially in my drawing class, I'd have them find some sort of a texture and bring it in and look at it and maybe select a 2-inch square of that texture, or maybe a 1-inch square of that texture, and then have them blow it up fairly large and draw, just to get an idea that it's not always a formal composition, but just a matter of maybe how you choose and select that subject matter. So, and another good thing about if you're using reference from Pinterest or Instagram, that, that's already been photographed by somebody who probably was keeping composition in mind. And what a nice tip on that is to go find some of those really nice photographs that for whatever reason capture your attention in Instagram, and maybe save it, print it out or something, and dissect it and figure out what is the compositional structure that person used to shoot that photograph. So that'll help you. So when you go out and maybe are starting to work plein air and not relying on a photographic reference that somebody already made some decisions for you, you're going to have to make those decisions when you're sitting out there braving the elements with a plein air sketch or a painting, that you know what you're doing as well. So it just takes a little effort and exercises to sharpen your knowledge base and skill set as well. So, and I have gone on for 16 whole minutes at the moment. So I hope this episode was helpful and gave you something to think about, some things to try and go look up and keep growing those skills. I hope your journey in watercolor is progressing. If not, let me know. Drop me some comments in the video for this episode of Talking Watercolor, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. So give me a like and a subscribe. I'd appreciate it. It helps out a lot. So I'll see you next week, episode 14.